Yes, the approval of budgets and LCAPs and. It should be.
What second reading?
And I think. I think that already went, so I think it's already recording. Is it going live? It is live right now. Live. Welcome.
Yeah, because that's how it connects to the audio.
Testing. Okay. So welcome everyone to the special session prior to the board meeting. And do we need to take roll since John's not here, or do we? Let's do that. Okay, so roll call. Trustee Daly. Present. Trustee Lopez.
Present.
Trustee Maestas.
Present.
Trustee Marks.
Present.
Trustee Mejia.
Present.
Vice President Irvin is on his way, and President Brown, I'm here. Okay, so turn it over to Dr. Noguchi.
Oh, I think it's going to work. Perfect. All right, well, thank you everyone for spending a little extra time today as we end the year. This is our last board meeting of the year, and we're able to find a little slice of time, about an hour and a half, that we're going to take and work on board governance. We've been working on board governance throughout the year, and really the purpose of board governance is to ensure that this team, the 7 of you and myself as a superintendent, have shared values, shared understandings, and we work together as a team, because we know and research shows that the stronger the governance team is for a school district, the more effect it has on student outcomes. And so I appreciate your time and energy today. So before I turn it over to Sally Frazier, I do want to just share a little bit about Sally. Sally has been working with us for a number of years. She actually is part of Leadership Associates, who was the search firm that the board at the time worked with in the selection of the superintendent. And so we've been blessed that she has been able to come and still continue to facilitate governance workshops. And she most recently facilitated the superintendent's evaluation, which will officially end tonight with my contract for this coming year. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sally, and we're going to lead a discussion. Just a little bit of housekeeping. There's 2 microphones over there. I thought we could just share, like 2 of us share and the 2 of you share, and we each share between 2, and then that way we'll be able to still get our voices heard. This is live streamed and recorded, so we need to make sure that we use the microphone. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sally.
Great. Thank you very much. And in the interest of time, because I've heard a number of times, this is before your regular board meeting, you have an hour and a half. I want to be mindful of that time. And also thank you all for making time for this, because I think if we'd have waited till September or August or some later time, it really would have been not as current in terms of the information that we're going to review. And Dr. Noguchi is correct. This is all about really continuing to look at who you are as a governance team, because that is so critical for all the students and the families that you serve throughout your community, as you well know. So I'm honored to be able to be here with you again this afternoon. As you know, this survey you had taken some time ago, and we had thought we might get to it a little bit earlier, but we had really wanted to have it have the amount of time that it should have. So we some of the items that are on there that we'll talk about may no longer be of the same level of interest. Welcome, Mr. Irwin. And I want to go through the information. Looking for a seat. There you go.
You were invited to the party.
And it is not musical chairs. You will not lose a seat. The information you have, one of the sheets that you have we'll put a ranking by the theme areas. One of them will show those that you responded that you've got this or we do this well. And the other is let's discuss or needing clarification. And so those were pulled out. But I also thought it might be easier to see some of those items if we did a scatter plot of where people had, so that you would know how many had ones and twos and that kind of thing, because that might help enrich the conversation and explain why we may be spending a little bit more time on some than on others. At this time, I also want to, there were only two comments in the comment section, and I'd like to review those. They're very short. One was we work well together, and it's good to review our roles and responsibilities periodically so we are on the same page when we have new members join the board. And I think that is somewhat summarizes why this activity was done at this time. The other one I think is important for your next steps here. The comment was, I would like to have seen an answer that states that we do it, we are growing in it, but we need more time invested in this activity. So as we go through these items this time, those that you think need more time invested in the activity, that would be your next steps. You may want to take a few minutes at a board meeting if there's something that just needs minor clarification. So thank you for that comment, and I think there's a way that we can use that comment today. Okay? And Dr. Noguchi, you were going to kind of make comments if there was follow-up items so that when we get to the end, we kind of know what those next steps might be. So if we start with the ranking by theme areas, your highest rank was preparing for meetings, then conducting meetings, managing transitions, and board culture. Each of those had one item that we will discuss. When you get to the scatter plot, you'll see which those items are. And the three that we may want to spend a bit more time on are board structure, board role, and board unity. And again, because this was taken some time ago, some of those areas may have been clarified, or there may have been experiences that help you understand them more, but we want to spend the time on those areas, particularly the last two, that need that discussion so that there is clarity for the board. The next item, if I'm ready to go on, okay. Those statements which included responses of 3 and 4. Some of the items, the governance team members actively participate in board deliberations. Some of the real positive things that came out: agendas are focused on the district's priorities and goals. The board effectively orients new trustees. The governance team model the district's values in their behavior. So your values of how you, your tone at board meetings, your respectful, how you honor the people that come before you. I think that is an important one. And then treat each other with respect. Again, that word respect, and actively identify and address conflicts among team members. That's a really important one. So it was good to see those items on that first sheet. And then those that indicate responses for let's discuss or need clarification. As you can see, the bottom of that starts with actually where your rankings were higher: the conducting meetings, managing transition, board culture, and board structure. And I'd prefer to go through those on the scattergram so that we don't take those without understanding how the marks were on that. Does that make sense? Is that okay if we approach that in that way? So if we start the first two areas that are on the scattergram, which is this document here that will have the two ones, okay, does everyone have that one? And if anyone has questions or comments as we go forward with this, at the time we hit the item would be the time for us to do that. And the first would be the items on board unity. You have this one? Yeah. Okay. Board unity, you can see there are 3 there that have either 1s or 2s in them. Governance team members share a common understanding of governance. That might be a very broad, but there were one person that wanted to discuss and then 1, 2. Are there any comments on that, having a common understanding of governance? Was it the item in terms of board unity? Is that something that maybe is clarified at this point, or does something come to mind?
Yep. I think this is an area where we've constantly been working, and we've had help, and we've discussed, and it's something that, for me, has been resolved. I don't know if there's anyone that feels differently.
I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about the different, what governance is, and so being that a few of us are a couple years in, right, and we have a new board member, that it takes time to transition from being a citizen to being somebody that is in a governance position. And that when we're at board meetings as a citizen, when we're participating in that piece of it, there's information that we're not privy to. And so I was thinking, the other day I was reading something about some legislation that's happening, right? And what legislators are doing. And now being in this position that I'm in, I understand that there are things that I just don't know that they do. And sometimes and before I was in this, I didn't get that. And so I think when understanding of governance, we're all in a different place in understanding. Like some of us, particular a couple people on this board, have been doing governance for a long time, right? And so know the ins and outs of things, like in terms of policy, educational policy, or things like why can't I think right now? The bond measure stuff, right? And the budget, those pieces of governance that we aren't experienced in. I don't know if all of us share a common understanding of those pieces quite yet. Those are things that I think we'll build to. But in terms of common, I'm not sure like we're all in the same place. I think, and an understanding that, knowing that we're not all in the same place, that you have more experience than I do in that piece. I think one is a good thing. Like I know that you have much more experience than I do in budgets and the bond measure and things like that than I would. And it's going to take me a long time to even get close to the knowledge that you have in that. So I see this as both a negative and a positive, that we all share an understanding that we all have expertise that we acknowledge and respect.
Negative and positive, algebraic expression, or is that just general?
Everything's for me is math, right?
You had a comment?
Just to follow up on what you said, the reason that I keep going to the CSBA conferences is because I still have a lot to learn about governance, and things are changing constantly. And so we're never going to get to a point where we feel like we're there. We always have to grow in governance.
Yeah, I was gonna echo on that because I understand there's newer board members, but also for the ones that have been here and a little bit longer, is how do we dimensionalize our work, right? Because there's a process of you're barely learning, you're getting the ropes, then you go into the stage where you're like, okay, I got this system down, and then for me, it's how do you dimensionalize the work that you do here, right? And I think that it's because a lot of people out there also see us as they don't understand the difference between governance and legislative, right? They see politicians in the same light, but legislating and governing, it's two different things, right? And so I think understanding and knowing that where those boundaries are set, right, in this workplace, of how much can we do legislative, right? Or how much can we do in promoting or growing a program or suggesting a program, as opposed to we are creating laws. And we are accepting laws, but they aren't created for the most part by us, right? I guess that work in terms of growing the governance teams to, okay, we need to catch up those that are new to understand the lay of the ground. Then how do we make them into a more well-rounded governance team, and how do they start to express what they came here to do? Because we have to understand, everyone in this room, had good intentions when they ran and when they're out there and as a citizen. But how do you take those ideas and actually grow them, right, from the work that we do as a governance? Because there is a way, but we need to continue to work towards finding how in the appropriate manner. So that's why I think that let's discuss it, because there's always the understanding can always of what governance means can always change based on the climate that we have.
Along that same lines, when you say governance, and especially I've gone to those workshops at the CSBA as well, but I also know that everybody, many people interpret it differently when they come out of the same workshop. People hear things, or I guess not hear, but interpret things differently. And so that's part of that work in progress, because, come on, well, what do they mean about this? Or what do they mean about this? Oh, how does your district, do this? And it's the same information, and should be doing the same thing, but it's not always interpreted that way, And I don't know if that a degree of from infancy to, to maturity in terms of where you're at on that spectrum as far as a board member, or that's just the way things are. That's just life, in terms of trying to make sense of all the things that we're responsible for. And that distinction that Trustee Lopez says about between governance and legislation. Most people in the community won't align us with governance. They're gonna align us with, you don't want to pass that, you the one, y'all did this and y'all did that, thinking it's not even laws, it's policies. So there's another layer that we have to be responsible with, educating our community about the difference between governance, policy, and legislation, laws. And so, yeah, I can see that's one of those areas. I think we're never going to get to a point, and it's like, oh, we're there. It's always a work in progress. I think it's always going to be a work in progress, because that's just the nature of that beast.
Very good. Boy, what rich comments. This is called a self-reflection survey, and really there was some deep thought about what governance means, and it really does set the whole picture, and you gave some good summary statements as well. I wanted to mention, you talked about everybody being maybe at a different point in that. Remember on one of the slides we talked about in the training that you go, when you run for office, from an I to a we, but you don't want to lose the me. And that has a lot to do with the interpretation, with the role, what you have control over and what you don't, and a lot of learning that goes along the way. So that was a real rich discussion, and thank you. And that's why I like saying, let's discuss, not we need to improve in this, because that's not what it's about. It does take an understanding, and that's what you're seeking here. The next two in that area does anyone else want to comment on that before we move forward? Okay, the next two that we would stop on would be board members know, respect, and follow governance team norms. And then board members know, respect, and follow governance team beliefs. So there were significant number of number ones that let's discuss. And I don't know if the previous discussion maybe enriches the thoughts on that, but if there's something specifically that's written down in team norms that is a question, or an understanding of team beliefs, that might be, this might be appropriate time to share that. There's a differentiation there.
comment on, you know, I think, you know, we do that, you know, do it well, to a degree that, I want to say, norms, because sometimes people can misinterpret that to means that the unity, because it's under board unity, that we all vote the same way, you know, and that couldn't be further from the truth, you know, and I've seen that come up in prior discussions or prior organizations I've been a part of where we had group norms or norms, especially when I was overseeing the ASMJC over at Modesto Junior College. That was the thing that always came up, that, you know, we can always agree to disagree. But people were thinking that, well, you know, each thing that came up, that we had to all be on the same page. And if that's the case, we wouldn't have a democracy. It'll be an autocracy. Right, or republic, yeah. So, yeah, I just wanted to not kind of bring clarity to that in terms of, because it is under board unity, that norms means adherence to the norms, not to or the way we vote or whatever.
I'm doing it. I have no idea. I can only do one, sorry. And this is actually not the updated, we changed 2 words on this, and I don't have that in my file. I just put it up there.
Yeah, and I think this may be in reference to your published, you have the norms and protocols and norms document. I don't know if this is what people referenced as specifically to those.
Norms are page 1, and then protocols are how we act, but it's agreements, it's what we've gone over many times. Just remember, this isn't the
This
most
is
updated, we changed a word.
Also a small piece of what we want to try to accomplish, so if that's
Right.
very productive.
I think it's helpful because it's these two are. I mean, it'll give us the clarity for later.
I grew up at Norm's, is one of the most popular restaurants in Los Angeles.
Oh,
That's
funny.
I don't think people were referencing that.
Not a reference, not our reference. But here's what it says. As we work together as a board, we agree to the following. We acknowledge that each of us brings different personal strengths and focus to issues. Number 2, we acknowledge that only the board as a whole has authority to take action and give direction to the superintendent. Number 3, we are well prepared for meetings and attempt to clarify questions with staff in advance. 4, to promote student achievement, we will focus our efforts on the present and future needs of the district. 5, we demonstrate concern for the personal well-being of our governance team members. 6, we respect and we are respectful and non-judgmental of one another. 7, minority views are respected and can be expressed, but we stand by the collective will of the board. Number 8, we actively listen to each other and encourage full participation in discussion and decisions. 9, we stay on task. And lastly, both in closed and open session, we will not speak over others, and we will follow a method, pressing a button or raising a hand so the president can call on members in order. So those are just good norms for us as we walk through what do we want to be when we met together and came up with those, just to be able to say these are the things that we agree to. And so it's just always helpful to review them every so often and say that. And then, you know, our team beliefs. So to me, partially, that's our beliefs too.
So whether it was knowing them, respecting them, or following them is unknown. And those are 3 rather unique or different perspectives on it. Most people probably know them or know where they are, have had exposure to them. Whether they're being respected and follow, I don't know if that's where the discussion point was or not. So, and perhaps this is something that is beyond discussion point at this time, unless someone has something to add.
I always think it's good to review them at least once a year, just to remember, oh, these are the things, or the superintendent remind us, by the way, remember, this is how we don't do this, or we need to do it this way, which helps refresh our memory on the protocols that we've agreed to.
Okay, thoughts on that comment? The review. I would just have one thought on that when you say the superintendent to remind us.
That's when we don't do it according to the protocols, that sometimes she has to say, by the way, this is how we're supposed to do this, which I appreciate because we all have to, oh yeah, I fell into an old habit or an old pattern. And so she's.
So as a
taught me couple
governance
times.
team, I think any one of us should have the right to call that
Oh.
and say, oh, wait a minute, guys, I think we're off our norms. Can we just
Definitely,
review this
definitely,
number
but-
7 for a minute?
Yeah, and we do hold ourselves accountable pretty well, I think. We can call each other out and say, hey, let's
That
not-
was my point. I mean, you can with one another too. I think that's important because it shouldn't really be your superintendent telling her bosses what they're doing right or wrong. Sometimes it's a little more appropriate if
It's
it's.
really tough, but it's
board
in
to
a
board.
conversation, and she does it so
Yes.
gracefully that it's really, it's well received usually.
Reminders are good. Other points
If I
on
said
that?
reminder, she's not reprimanding us, she's just reminding us.
Thank you.
No, I just have a question about the GTMs do not undermine decision of the board. I know there wasn't an area of concern or let's discuss, but what would be a example of that?
About 3 years ago? Or was it 5 years ago?
I think it's 5 years
Okay.
ago.
I don't
wasn't
think
it?
we've
Or
had an
4?
example recently, John, but,
Well, I was just thinking, not in particular, but in general,
Yeah. so there have been times where we've had a particular board member just really step on someone's face publicly. And they undermined other people's rights to express themselves.
Intimidating someone if they have an opinion, or perhaps going out into the public and speaking to the contrary of what the decision of the board was, would undermine the image of the board as well as the decision.
I have to say,
You said 5 years ago, and I was like, oh, I came on 5 years ago.
You're safe.
Just before you came on.
to say that it's nice to step out in public and be recognized as a member of a board that works well together. When we go to CSBA conferences, we don't find many districts who feel that way about each other. And we've worked really hard to develop that.
And this time is a part of that development, because it's hard to do that when you're sitting more formally and taking action on items. So those efforts really do make a difference. So thank you for asking for clarification on that. Ready to move to board roll? Okay, with board roll, agree on the role of the superintendent, the board, and the relationship between them. There were about 3 that needed some discussion on that. The role of the superintendent, the board, and the relationship between them. What comes to mind for someone on that? Is it fairly clear to people at this point? Because again, this was taken some time ago. So perhaps there have been some discussions or some activities that change your responses here?
So I guess I don't know if we've ever discussed if we agreed on that relationship. I think maybe if we have, then maybe that fuels what I know to be that relationship. I guess it's taken me a little while to think of it as the superintendent's role is to look to provide the method, the how of the vision of the board or our vision, which is the why, is that the what, right? We talk about that when we do the board policies. So we're kind of the what people and she's the how person. And that's how I've viewed that relationship. I don't know if that's because of the experience. I don't know if we've ever talked about that. That's the agreed upon relationship that we have with the superintendent, or that just came out of from the work that we've done with policies, between the board policy and the administrative, the ARs. So if it's a time for us to discuss that we can agree that that's the relationship, or that I'm off and that maybe there is more to that, then I'd like to hear what other people have to say too.
Well, I know from, my experience in being with us that there was a collective, policy agreement that we work with the superintendent in terms of anything we needed, or site-specific or anything like that. Now, and this is just recently, another district I know, because a friend who happens to be a principal in the district used a not too good word to describe the board member who kept calling him, asking him for stuff. And he was like, that effing board member. And I was like, oh, your board members call you? And I was like, yeah, we call all the time for stuff, And I was like, oh, wow. It's like, yeah, it's like, no, we don't. We ain't trying to add to chaos already, on a school site already, given what you guys got to do all day long, and then have a board member, because they feel like he got to drop what he's doing because as a board member to address that board member. And to me, that takes away from the goal that he has every day to hold his students first and his teachers and, and so forth first. But he was very, very upset by being, constantly being called. He termed it harassment.
John,
So,
so just to kind of push back on what you were saying, so you're saying that that isn't what you see as the relationship between you and superintendent of
no,
calling?
no,
Okay.
that's like night and day, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Because I know that those conversations do arise, right, when we hear something out in the community. And I know that superintendent gives us a space in which to do it in, right? Of course, we use our
There's
better
got to be
judgment.
limits, though.
Yeah, there's got to be limits, right? Because I think one of the things was here somewhere, I can't find it right now, is when we talk about dealing with direct staff, right? Because I've heard a lot of individuals out and heard stories of like, oh yeah, no, I direct staff, or I go directly to the staff member. 'cause
Yeah,
I don't, right.
Yep, heard the same thing.
Right,
Mhm.
and it's like, no, it's like we have, as a board, we have,
No authority.
if anything, the authority with one individual, that's superintendent, right? And so if we get anything, it's through them, right? It's through her, in this case. And so, because, yeah, and I think that for us, and especially me, I don't think, I mean, I don't think that she necessarily drops everything she's doing, but I do think that there is a level of like, hey, like this is something that one of the board members we're calling attention to what we hear in the community, and that's our role as well, right? And so I think that I would agree with you that yes, we do that, but it doesn't become something, or I hope it doesn't become something where it's like every 5 minutes, hey, you know what, I thought of this, or I heard this, and it's like we
have
those-
boundaries.
we have those times, we have those spaces in time where we have conversations, or one-on-one conversations, where we have those moments to illustrate that for, right? Because yes, I believe that's a lot better than having or trying to go directly to staff and saying, hey, I don't want to bug superintendent, but I'm going to bug you, or I'm going to talk to you because you will get this done, or because then we're jumping protocol, we're jumping boundaries. Yeah.
Item number 7 is trustees do not attempt to direct staff, and you were very strong on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can I go back to the one that we were
Please,
just
yes.
discussing? I think an important thing for us to consider is the word transition with that. Because just as we're talking about having a new board member come into the mix, we have to realize that it won't be too long until we will have a new superintendent coming into that mix. And it's important that we as a board all function well, understanding that role so that we can help a new superintendent be trained into their role and make sure that we continue to be a strong team through any transition.
Maintenance has her mold, right? Maintenance has her mold, right? In the warehouse down, right?
We're currently working on AI.
Cloning. So any more discussion on agreement on the role of the superintendent, the board, and relationship between them? Dr. Noguchi?
The only thing that I would remind us is that we do have board protocols, and if you just go in there, it's a 15-page document, just to reacquaint yourself for those questions that may come up, because it really is a how-to. The role of the board president.
Just add that, and when those conversations happen of like, hey, we heard this in the community, we just, I think it's our role just to leave that information where it's at, right? And then, you can ask for like follow-up, what happened? What was the situation? A lot of times we understand, but it's not like, hey, I need you to do this, or I need you to, hey, you did this, I want you to do this the other way. It's like, no, like, can we look into this? What's going on? And, I've always, at least when I've gotten reports back, I'm like, okay, great. It worked a certain way,
When
right?
you're finished. Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just, when you're finished. Yeah, and when I think about this, I remember one of the main questions that we would get when we did debates on, where, they'd ask us questions, we'd be sitting in a row. So the first time I ran, there were 13 of us for 4 seats. So they would ask us the same question. So, and one of the questions was, if there's an issue from a parent and they come to you, what do you do? What do you do with that information when a parent, because that's like a common thing. And I think the teachers union also, that was on their questionnaire. And so I thought, at first you're like, okay, what do I do with this information? And usually it's ask the parent, did you go to the principal or the teacher, whoever the issue is with, did you ask them first what it was that happened? And did you talk to them and tell them what happened? Then you also inform the superintendent, hey, this is an issue out there. I want you to be aware of it in case it turns into something else. And so that they're aware of it. And I think that was the part that I had to learn later, was the inform the superintendent, because I was more apt to go to the principal and say, hey, what happened with this parent? Did you take care of this? Rather than go to the superintendent. And so I had to learn that. And that was just because that's how it should be done, so the superintendent knows what's going on. So then I learned, okay, if somebody emails me, I forward it to the superintendent and say, here's an email from a parent that's upset about something. I let them know that, I will let the parent know, or whoever it is, a community member, let me know if this doesn't get taken care of. I forward it to the superintendent, let me know in a day if you don't hear back. Because I figure, you can't resolve it in a day, but you can at least get back to that parent or that community member and let them know, we're working on this, or can I meet with you? Let's set up an appointment, all of that. So it's kind of managing that in a way as a board member, not taking it on as our responsibility to fix it, because that's not our responsibility. And so that was hard, because we're all problem solvers. That's why we got on the board. We want to fix things and we want to make it better. And so, but to be able to say, we've hired the superintendent, that's the superintendent's role. Our role is to receive information and then see if there's a way that we can resolve it together, so.
Other comments on that? Okay, we're going to move to agreeing on the role of board president. One person wanted some clarity on that. And I think Dr. Noguchi indicated that that is in the protocols in terms of, was there something specific on the role of the president? Or might that come out in? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I did this, because, I don't know, it could have been me. But I think for me, I just always want to make sure that we understand that the board president doesn't have more power than the rest of the board. They are the spokesperson for the board, but that doesn't mean that they have more power. So we've had other board presidents in the past that have taken that as they're the one who calls because they're president. They would do the thing that you just said wasn't a good thing, John. That was telling everybody what to do, calling staff, and using it as authoritative role, which it's not. And so I don't think any of you would do that, but maybe I just wanted to make sure we talked about it and ensure, even though it's not really, I don't know how our, how people perceive it outside. So just to make sure that we understand that role, because if there is an issue, then we need to hold that president accountable to it. This is for the future. It's not for you guys, but for the future, for any future people that come in. And so that they're aware that that's how we function as a board. Because it's hard. I'm just telling you, when we put those protocols together, we spent probably 4 meetings on it, and 3 of us worked on them. One was an attorney, but we worked together on them on the board and to figure out how can we make sure that for our own selves to govern ourselves, that we're doing it in an appropriate manner, but also to protect future boards from board members that might not want to follow the board protocols, so we could hold each other accountable. And I think that was our goal in that. And we've revised them as the board changes. It's good to revise them. It's good to talk about them again and say, hey, I disagree with this. Let's change that. And that's what we did last time we went over it. So I think that's important for us.
Before 2018 or after?
It was before 2018, yeah. So we actually had 2 attorneys on our board at that time. So one wasn't on the small committee that we worked on it because we could only have 3 of us. Then we'd bring it to the board, talk about it, go over it, revise it, agree on it, and then move to the next part. So that was.
And it provides a clear framework, and I think that was the intent. And I think you hit on part of number 10,
Oh, right.
that the board president is designated to speak on behalf of the board, not their opinions, but on behalf of the board. So it would be the board's opinion, and the board gives that direction, but the responsibility goes to the board president. Does anyone want to speak more to that, as that kind of ties in to clarity on the board? Is that fairly well understood at this point, or?
I want to add a comment there. I know the superintendent, Sarah, has brought it up several times that like the president speak on behalf of the board, but if you do want to comment, make sure that you're careful the way you comment, that it is your opinion as a board member, that you're not speaking on behalf of the board, and that you're clear when you say that. If you do answer a question, that you're not speaking for the entire group, that it is just your opinion at that point.
Good
So
clarification.
I think that's important to know, like,
Good.
don't feel like you cannot answer something, but know that you are very clear, you let them know that you're answering as a person, as an individual, as your opinion, not as a whole body. Because they'll make the assumption that is that everybody, if you're not very clear on when you say that. And then another, so.
The only thing I would add to that is, yes, we want everyone to have their own voice, but you have to be very cognizant and careful to not allow someone from the public to basically find out your voice. So what is your opinion on this? And 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 then it comes to the board and it's already been out there. So that's the reason why if the public or the news reach out to you, it's letting me know, because if I know that they're all reaching out to you, we don't want basically a board vote without it being a board vote. So we just have to be cognizant, and I kind of keep track of what's what, so.
Yeah, and that's happened before. We've had it in the newspaper where the board members, it said what they thought, and it was like, oh, wow, that's pretty much a vote out in public. And so it made it kind of difficult at the board meeting because you already knew where people stood rather than talking about it as a board, so, which is what we want to do together.
So I wondered also about how the public perceives the board president and board vice president. I kind of, like personally, and I guess, based on the roles and everything, I see it kind of like, we're a governance team, and on a lot of teams, we have a team captain, and the team captain's job is to keep the team like moving, right? And so it's a difference between leadership and power, right? And that role is the leadership role to keep us moving as we move along in our meetings. And like, if you just look at the stuff that the board president is their responsibilities, it's really being the spokesperson as well as guiding the agenda, guiding the pace of the meeting, all those things. It's a team captain. So still part of the team, and not any more powerful than the rest of the team, but making sure that the team runs smoothly is kind of how I see that role.
Good clarifications. Thank you.
Not Jordan or Kobe.
I think we already covered the micromanaging or rubber stamping. I think your opening comment really spoke to that. Board members following protocols for visiting school sites, there was some need to discuss that. I don't know if that's been clarified since.
I will validate that a lot of these ones and twos are probably mine. However, it was because I think it was like,
Right into your
I think
beginning,
it was
yes.
January.
Yeah, it was early on. It was early on.
It was like, yeah. So,
April.
so there was a lot that were mine. There are some that have received clarification, and there are some that I still kind of disagree with. However, I am only one voice, and that's okay.
Anything, though, that you're seeking clarification, good time to bring it up. Any of the
Oh.
areas that we've already.
No, because
Okay.
I'll jump forward, on the orienting new board members, I think that everybody does a really great job because they'll answer questions and
Good.
everything. Like Dr. Niguchi and President Brown went through a whole book with me, and I mean, they did a really good job with that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. That's important.
I mean, I do want to talk a little bit about the visiting schools, just because I know that when I came in, there was like, oh, we had to give them ample time, and we have to go through superintendent. And I definitely agree, though it's hard for some of us that have our regular, jobs and stuff, responsibilities to really to do 2 weeks or 3 weeks in advance, a week in advance of like, hey, I'm not gonna be available these days or what. Sometimes we do have that. And other times we don't, and sometimes we get a little break in our day, and we're like, hey, I would like to pop by, and understanding that. And the other part is like, we also don't want to, because we understand what our role is in terms of how people perceive us, right? And especially in the schools, it's like the board member is going to come in, right? I mean, I wish they didn't think about it that way, right? As like, they treat us as another parent. We're another parent coming in, or we're a community member wanting to see the school, right? And then in our role, we want to just pop by, or we want to visit classrooms without having to disrupt the day, right, for them, because I know that ultimately, whether we like it or not, it's going to disrupt their day, because they want principal to be there, and it's like you don't have to do all that for us. We appreciate it, but we just want to come by and see a classroom, say hi. And so I do, like, I always find that's a little like difficult, and especially coming from a community, is like, I understand that's how people feel about our roles. At the same time, like, I wish it wasn't there, because I would like to just, to be something more natural. And so that's always been a struggle for me in terms of visiting classrooms or visiting schools, yeah.
So something I do want to speak to, I remember 5 years ago, there was a notation of time in there. We took that out a couple renditions ago, so now it says, basically work through Antoinette. And if you find that you have the day off tomorrow, you can reach out to Antoinette, and if nothing's going on, I mean, we can still accommodate that within the day. I think that's difficult. It's difficult for teachers, difficult for principal, but if you manage to have a day off tomorrow and you weren't expecting a day off tomorrow, it doesn't hurt. Actually, connect with me, connect with Antoinette, and we'll call the principal and say, hey, can we get out into classes? And most often, I think they're going to agree to it, but that piece did get taken out.
Yeah, I remember that. I was just saying that's still kind of difficult because there's still that culture that's still kind of there, right? And we still understand that even though things are changing, it takes a little bit of time for even principals or there's still that kind of culture, right? And it'll take time, but
Not even going to the classroom. Sometimes I just want to go just to walk the environment to feel to see how things all the other things that go into.
I also want to comment on that too, because balancing dad and board member, right? Sometimes I'm going to events because I'm dad, and I don't want to be like called out as like the board member is coming, and we often do get called like, we want to welcome the board member, and I'm fine with being welcomed, but sometimes I'm just helping out being dad at school. And so although even some of those times I still tell Antoinette I'm going. Like I'm gonna be at Lakewoods thing this time. Even though I don't really, I think they know me well enough there that I don't have to reach out. But so there's just a balance there between being a parent and being a board member, and how do you find that balance especially with the staff? Is going back to reaching out to staff, setting up a meeting with a teacher because there's something going on with my son or my daughter, right? But it's still, I mean, you just think about as a teacher, sitting on the other side of that conversation, knowing I'm speaking to a board member, right? That's a really weird space to be living in. So, and that's not in our board protocols. I don't know.
Remember, being a board member, it's an art and it's a science, and you just defined the art part.
When I would go to school, I would tell them, I'm putting on my mom hat today. I'm not a board member, I'm just here as a mom, and I want to know about this, or what's happening with this with my child. And so that's what I did.
I get embarrassed.
So-
I get embarrassed out.
Yeah.
Child there, and then they know you're a board member, and then all of a sudden they're calling you out. I would imagine you just said, parent, Malika Irvin, John Irvin, but, board member, so sometimes you get a little, a little embarrassed, oh, shoot, they had to go there.
So sometimes we will be invited by a particular staff member to come and do something or see something. And I think it's critical that we still communicate through Antoinette, because even though we've been invited, we're still not recognized unless the district's aware. So it's tough. The more involved we are in the community and with the individual school sites, we become friends with people who are working at those sites, and it is convenient for us to go upon invitation, but we need to still remember that we've got that commitment to the district to represent the board anytime we are in an official capacity.
Yeah, and she's at San Francisco State now, so they could care less who I am until the check is due.
Okay, anything else on visitation of schools? Okay, we're going to do the next three items, 12, 13, and 14 together. Board members adhere to protocols for accepting an invitation to speak to a community group. That should be or organization. Know and follow protocols when speaking at public events. Know and follow protocols when contacted by the media. I think you had some key thoughts on that. What was the need for clarification or discussion in those areas?
if I put it on that, but I do think, I don't even remember like, did or not, but, how, the clarity, how long do we give the district that we're gonna be in a speaking engagement?
You know, I don't think that that is outlined specifically. I know it's embedded in here. I think, and we've seen this recently in this last year or so, that community members have asked board members to come and speak. So, you know, the sooner I know, the more I can connect the dots to see what might be, what could be a potential undercurrent or a need of the community, or maybe a need of the district to get information out, right? So the more I know and the sooner I know, the easier it is for me to do the work as far as responding to whatever the needs of the community is, in that regard.
I've been invited to speak. Been invited to speak in the Bahamas. I don't think I have to do anything.
I think we have a board bylaw about that.
Right.
You're speaking as a governance team, according to Mr. Lopez.
Yeah, we don't trust you alone on that subject, John.
Yep. Now it's all
And I
Bahamas.
think this may have been covered in something in the evaluation process too. It seems to me we've talked about this at some point in time. Maybe during our workshops, there seemed to be an understanding that there are, particularly with the media, I think Mrs. Marks gave an example of saying, may I have some time to get back to you on that or something, so you have some time to think about it and get the information that might be useful and put your thoughts together, because they're trained in how to get information from you rapidly, and you need to be aware of how to have important information shared.
Scary. Because you can be tricked into things that you don't want on the front page.
That's why
Yeah.
I always value the media training I had over the years at the national level, and when I was on different things, and how they teach you to respond and react, and your facial expression. I mean, the whole thing. So it's become very valuable.
Good.
Yes, I think we have a better understanding of the protocols being contacted by the media. I think as of late, I think we've been seeing more of the group organizations inviting us out, right? And so I think one of the things that at least I like to do is, I like to ask, what are specifically we talking about? How can we better, address what you want us to talk about? But also it's like, I know it's like we're not experts in education. We are board members from the community that have many different backgrounds and experience, and are professional in a certain section, right? I think the only one that hears in education is board trustee Maestas, and I'm sorry, yeah. Sorry, trustee Irvin.
Yeah. I knew you on campus.
I mean, yeah. So I apologize. Currently in the industry is trustee Maestas, but so I wouldn't be, if someone wants to come and talk to me or wants to talk about like the integral day-to-day stuff about education and certain things, I wouldn't be the best person to address that conversation, right? And it would be tailored specifically to Modesto City Schools and what we're doing and what are some of our goals. Then yes, we have that, right? Or if not, we can get a little bit more vetted through our superintendent. But yeah, I would say like we have to keep mindful of, we are in education, and we are professionals, but sometimes there's individuals and professionals in our district that have better answers to some of those questions that are being asked, and also I think it's our role as board members to also make those connections. One of the things that I really like and I do is like we have board members here that in 8, 10 years, 20 years we'll move on to other aspects, but we have staff members in Modesto City Schools that have been here 40 years, right? And so we need to, part of our role as agent changers is how do we connect a community, those backgrounds that we understand, those roles that we understand out in the community, and connect them to MCS as a whole, right? How do they build relationships with the community so that the change isn't happening through us, it's happening with us, or it's happening, we're the bridge to make those changes and have better understanding of how our processes work and how the education is happening at MCS. Building those bridges, I think, is important.
So part of what that was sharing was getting clarity of what the expectation and what information is needed from the group so that you don't go in uninformed about what they want. And you can seek others to help you with that. Anything else on those 3 areas? Let's move to board culture and do those 2 items together. Trustees are comfortable holding team members accountable for their behavior. There are no surprises between the board and the superintendent. Anyone want to comment on either of those items?
Thank you. So I think mostly for 16, I don't know. I don't feel like, probably let's talk a little bit more about it. I think number 17 is pretty clear to me. I think number 16, I don't know if it's super all that clear to me, or we can talk about it more, without offending others. Like if you're like, man, come on, you're that's like way out of line or something. And then is it okay, or like at least talk about it that when we do it, it's about that issue and not about anything else besides that issue, that we're discussing at that moment in time. Just a thought.
You're talking about board behavior. How do you hold one another accountable for that? Yeah, correct. Okay.
I don't think we've been in that issue, to get there yet. I think that's a good thing.
I think when we talked about the norms, some people talked to, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you could have finished, I'm sorry. I don't even remember which one I put on this, but for me, there's a couple of things. If it's something individually, I would much rather have somebody come directly to me. If it's something that needs to be communicated in front of the board, then that still, I believe, should be a conversation between those 2 people, and then they could talk about the fact that, like, I think we need to present this to the board, so there isn't that blindsiding with somebody. I think you're going to lose respect of people if you blindside them, especially because we're supposed to be a team and no person is above the other. In reference to the surprises, again, I don't remember which I put on that one. However, I think for me, this goes along with a couple of the unity and the roles. I do have issue forwarding parents' emails to anyone, really. And part of that reason is because I believe that if somebody's reached out to me, I need to ask their permission to forward that email. And if they're not wanting me to forward it, that's the confidentiality and the trust the public has to have in me in this position. And so there's that component where there may be some surprises for the superintendent, just for that possibility.
So
I got it.
could I just push back a little bit in terms, and I understand that, I don't think I've ever experienced that, but I definitely understand that it could happen. I would ask, so how do we actually address it, right? If we don't have all the information, and in terms of, I think mainly like how do we address that if there is no information on where to lead on? Is that just a suggestion to keep in mind in the back of your head? But then how do we address that formally with the parent? Because the parent wants answers, and parent wants, in this case, they want something to be done more than answers, right? how would you approach that, or how do you think that that can happen without sharing that information necessarily? Because we talk about we can speak for someone, or we can have them speak for themselves, and if by forwarding it, we're not speaking for them, they're speaking on their issue.
So, can I answer that? So I deal with confidentiality a lot in my role at work, and many times, and I've done this with parents that have come to me with an issue, right? So a parent comes to me with an issue, and then the only way that, I mean, if it just stops here, then that parent is pretty much just gonna get somebody that's gonna listen to them. They're not gonna get any resolution on that. So usually what I'll tell the parent is, you know, thank you for sharing that. Can I get some more information? And I write down some information. So I'm going to take this to, I usually tell them, I'm gonna take this information to the superintendent, so, you know, I'll pass this information along. But when I do pass the information along, usually when we have a discussion, I'll say, a parent I talked to had an issue. This is the issue. And then if the superintendent needs more information, like who's the student or what's the school, like I'll say something like, well, I don't really want to, like, because of confidentiality, I don't really want to know who the student is, but I can tell you the place, right? Or the issue that they had with, you know, with the school site. So I keep that piece confidential, but I still relay the information because that information needs to be known. Now, in terms of an email, this is a similar thing I would do too, is reach out, or before I even respond though, I like to get a sense of how to respond. So I usually ask the superintendent, I got an email that asked me about this. How should I respond? And then if it's okay to forward that email, then forward it. If I feel like that piece is like, yeah, they really need to just be forwarded, I usually just forward the email right away. So it really depends on that situation. But for the most part, I tend to always relay the information to the superintendent, whether it's using generalities in my speak, or if she needs more information, I ask the parent, can I share that information? Is it okay if I share this information?
Yeah.
And I can just respond back to that. I can only solve an issue if I have the information. If it's general and the folks just want just FYI or for your information, then that works perfectly.
Right.
But if they're looking for a resolution for a particular issue or incident, then if I don't have the information, I can't move forward. So.
Exactly. And I feel like, because I always ask when someone approaches me and says, hey, like I'm having this, I did this, and this. I always ask, like, okay, look, I've taken down your information. I'm going to share it with, you know, our superintendent. They will figure out who can best address that, right? And so they're like, okay, great. And so I forward that information. Because, but I have never had a case where someone's like, oh, you know, just keep this in them. I had people, hey, you need to look at this, right? And like, oh, you need to address this. Usually is around something that has happened on the board or is coming down the pipeline, right? And so those are the ones that I'm like, oh, you know what? And usually when we have conversations with superintendents, like anything else that you want me to know about is like, oh, I've been hearing this from community members, you know, that, because it's like a feedback. Hey, you should do this. You should go this way, right? Or have you guys thought about this? So that's different from a person is like, hey, my student is having this issue. I don't know what to do. I need it to be addressed. And so like, if we don't pass that along, and to have someone else, you know, at least get information to, because I always tell them, I'm like, at least what I can do for you is that you will have the information you need, right? It's like someone will contact you and they will kind of like update you on what you need. I don't know much further what's going to happen. That would be for you guys to talk. But because if it doesn't pass along, then you're responsible for that change, and we know that can't happen, right? Or most likely won't happen, right? In the specific parent, student, or issue that happened in the work site, right? Because it could be teachers as well, right?
Jolene, directly responding to your concern, I've learned some things as board president this year in needing to share things with Superintendent Noguchi. And when I've got something that I feel there may be some issues about whether there's confidentiality and trust, then I state specifically in response to them that with your permission, I'm going to share this with the superintendent so that, and that way, if there's pushback, I'm going to get it right away. And that way, I feel like I'm not owning the problem with that person, but I'm making sure that the right people are informed. So that's been really helpful for me.
Yeah, because again, it's also part of the conversation we had earlier about not only ourselves understanding the role of our position, but the community understanding what's our role, right? And a lot of times, a lot of people in the community think that because we are board members, we can go in there into the classroom and fix it, right? And that's not the case, right? For many reasons, that's not the case. And so I think it's also for them to understand is like there needs to be more than just me involved in this for the change that you want to see to happen, right? To possibly happen.
Right.
And that's part of the understanding our roles.
And that's what I wanted to come to. That's how I get to the point, because most of the folks in the community believe that I'm not going to say the change makers they expect of us, but they are the ones that think we resolve issues or things like that. And we're conduits, in that respect, that if we get the issue and I let them know, I'm gonna get this issue, because when they email us or text us or whatever, they believe they're in contact with the school district. That's their perception, most of the public. And so I let them know, okay, I can get this resolved for you, but I need to pass this on to the superintendent, and then we'll, get acting on it. But as an individual, I don't have that kind of, I'm not gonna say power, but authority to act and to resolve that particular issue directly. And so in order to get to that, we need to share this with the superintendent, who we directly hire, and, and things like that, to assure them, and it's kind of educating them on the process as well. We are your elected representatives, and we're going to represent you in this issue. But the resolution of that issue comes to the staff within the school district, and we deal with the highest of that staff directly.
So there's, I'm
Sorry.
please, no.
I just think there might be a little misunderstanding. It's not that I don't ask them, so I'm probably a little bit more leaning on the confidentiality side and asking a release of information as, may I give this? However, if somebody says no, I'm gonna let them know, like, hey, I can't resolve this. I can hear you. And a lot of the time, so for my experience over the last 6 months, a lot of the time that I've spoken with people is they really do just want to be heard. And if you're hearing them and listening to them and maybe providing them, like, have you talked to this person? Maybe you can go and talk to this person. Maybe you need to go and talk to a support person. There's a lot of different things that you can do. So it's not that I don't, if it needs to be addressed, absolutely. If it needs to be, I still have issue forwarding emails, because those are private thoughts sent to me, so it might not be, I'm still gonna ask permission for that.
I was gonna say yes. So I definitely understand now a little bit better. Yes, and so I think that it's important that you say that. It's like, well, then, yeah. But I do understand. I'm seeing if it's not something really like specific, of like, hey, you know what? Like, I've been hearing from folks, this is happening in this this school or this classroom. So it's something that's happening. They're not actually saying, hey, I need to address this. Is not something personal. There's also, you should have that reassurance of like, hey, okay, this is happening regardless of where it came from. It's like, we need to let it know, like, hey, can we look into this? Can we just, can I get a status updates on this? Because this is where I'm hearing, so that, so that way there's enough, because I understand like some people have approached like, hey, you know what, I heard that this is happening so-and-so place, right? But I don't want to get in the and I don't want to have repercussions, right? And so I understand that too. So now I see that kind of difference. I was looking at it more into a specific case, like, hey, my child is going through this with this specific, teacher, or my child is not doing this and is missing this. How can I get this? And then that's where, like, we need that information to pass it on. But if it's something where it's like, hey, you know what, I've been hearing or I've been seeing this and it doesn't seem right to me, it's also our job to kind of like let know, hey, what's going on here? Can you look into this? Can you help me out, like figuring out what is really going on in this area? Because I'm hearing this from community. But yeah, so I understand a little bit better now.
But I have one more last thing on this. It's kind of unrelated to that. And when I see about surprises, no surprises, I think more along the case like, I did my work very last minute and then I come to meeting and then I'm like, I need to recuse myself from blah, blah, blah. Like, and then nobody knows that I need to recuse myself from a consent agenda item. That's more of like a surprise thing, right? So I want to be able to let the board president know, let superintendent know that, look, there's something on the agenda that I'd like to see changed or something in the meeting that's different. Because I think I learned that pretty quickly on in the very beginning that I didn't know that protocol. And now that I know that protocol, I try my best to make sure that the important people know that if there's something on the agenda or something in the meeting that I have issue with, then I let them know ahead of time.
Good. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that was good for discussion and clarity. Okay. Okay, thanks for checking that. On board structure and preparing for meetings, given the time, I would like to have us look at those together. In terms of board structure, written agreements to clarify, actively uses and abides by agreements, uses these agreements to evaluate its effectiveness. Many of those things I think we have covered through the discussion of some of the other areas. Anyone have something additional to add to those? Okay.
We haven't talked about a lot of how we do evaluating our effectiveness. I mean, this is really helpful because we did a survey. We don't do that very often, and I think we're doing it about once a year. So I don't know if that's something that we need to do more often or not. It seems like we're accomplishing what we need to accomplish, and so, but this helped us go a little deeper to find out, are there issues that we need to talk about together so we can fix them. But yeah, that's fine. I just didn't see us doing that, so, on a regular basis other than once a year.
Yeah. And once a year, when you figure the speed of how everything goes throughout the year, to spend the time to really self-reflect, you really, that's really commendable. There are many boards that don't do it at all. And so
We didn't used to do it
yeah.
until Sarah came in. Then we started doing this, so that's really helpful.
Good. Okay, preparing for meetings, receiving sufficient information on items. I don't know if that's been clarified since the survey was taken. Is there anything more on that and everyone receiving the same information?
So I'm just used to getting a lot more information, at least in the past. So for me, I'm probably the one who put a 1 on here because when I get a board item, I would have 2 or 3 pages to read on the item. A superintendent decided that we would get PowerPoint instead of that information. And I really don't like voting on a PowerPoint. I like to see the information, like this is how much money we get the information in, this is how much this physical costs, but I would get, like, basically before someone come up to the microphone, I would have 3 pages of information on that, or if it's on student data, we get a lot of that information, which is really helpful for me. But that's how I liked seeing it, was this, because then I felt prepared for the meeting. I felt like I read the information. I was ready to hear a summary of it when the person gets up to talk, and then I would vote on it. And so that, for me, has been difficult, because there's sometimes I'm like, I wish I had like way more information on it, because I can't figure out where the money's going. And so, and I've mentioned it, but I haven't, it's my responsibility to give what I would like to the superintendent so that she's aware of this is how much information I would like. And for me, that's helpful. I get the binder, but so just to give you an information, our binders, so tonight it's really big because we have two big reports in there. We have the LCAP and we have the budget. So that's going to be about 3 inches, just because that's a lot of information. But when I used to get our binder, so let's just pull that out. My whole binder used to be this thick every time, every 3 weeks. I got a binder that was that thick. And that was all the information I had to read. It took me a while to read through it. But it was because there's a lot, and a lot of it's repetitive from previous votes that we do. But some of it's like we're doing something new, and I just want how do we do this? How do we do this kind of process? And I'm just too tired tonight to pull up one out of my brain and say, here's how it works. But for me, I like the information because I'm voting on millions of dollars on some items, and I'm like, gosh, I just don't know where it all goes. And so I trust, I trust the district, I trust people here, but I still like to know more information.
I have a comment on that too. I agree, and I also think that, I know this is probably not the space to give a suggestion on it, but I often find that the information I get and that PowerPoint is the exact same PowerPoint as the presentation, and so then I often think like, why am I even reading this if it's just gonna be read to me at the meeting? Like, it's nothing more than I would get by just sitting at the meeting. And so, what we do get, so what I'm wondering is within that presentation, if there could be even hyperlinks to, I know this is a suggestion, a hyperlink embedded within some pieces of that, so I can, as I'm going, I can click on that to get more information for that specific piece, just so that I can get a little bit more depth.
So I'm hearing about the need for more information, but anything that we do in the board meeting, as far as your hyperlinks, all of that is going out to the community as well. So anything that we put out, everything has to go out to the community in addition to. Any of you who need more information, you can always ask. Something that I did find when I first got here, and we can certainly work to discuss this. I don't know that we're going to have time today to do this, but what I saw when I got here 5 years ago, cabinet staff were spending hundreds of hours writing reports that did or did not even get read. And quite honestly, I need to get them focused on teaching and learning and support for schools. So there's a fine balance, though, between going from no information or very limited information to going to what once, the binders that we all had when we first got here. So certainly we can work to figure out what that balance is as we move forward.
Or the PowerPoints or the presentations can be slimmed down and that information in a report, and then that way the presentation is like, I don't know, more presentation style rather than just the information twice. I don't know if that makes sense.
I'll give you an example. Okay, we'll use this as an example tonight just because this is how my brain works, but because we're going to do a thing on parent ambassador. So I would, in the past, if we were doing a report on that, I would have at least 3 or 4 pages on that. It would give me, here's how many students we've met with, and I think this is in a PowerPoint at some point, but here's how many students we met with, here's how many parents we talked to, here's, this school site has had this much, this school site. I would have a graph or a chart that would show me every single school site and exactly how many students and how many people were talked to at that school site. And then it would give me a summary. These ones were because of this at this school site. So we had, the reason this one is higher is because this happened at this school site. The reason this one is lower is because this didn't happen at this school site. And so just to give a summary, then in the article, it would give me all that information. And then the staff member would come up and give me bullets on what these things were and why they happened that way. So the whole board would have that information. So that's just kind of how it used to be done. So for me, I just like to, okay, here's the attendance report, here's why it's like this. So that's just how I got used to that kind of format. And then new superintendents came in and they did it differently. And so it's kind of changed, so.
We used to have CSBA agenda online, and I felt like that broke down because that broke down everything by each category, by each agenda item, and then it would give you the presentation and it'll give you PDFs of the rest of the report right on on your fingertips. So basically, basically I think you were still there when we got that one, because we just recently switched to to Gamma, right? So I did kind of enjoy CSBA online in that aspect, because you got to open it, have everything. So I think even you have a little bit more information.
So
Yeah.
mine is from before the internet. So before you use the internet. Oh, wow. So everything came, you couldn't click on anything. You had to look it up in your binder.
Yeah, no. I did want to briefly mention, sorry, I know we're 5 minutes before time. When it talks about conducting meeting, this is maybe a follow-up. I had kind of heard mention around the sticking to Mondays as a board meeting day, or changing it. I don't know when we decide Mondays. I don't know if that's still something that works for everyone, but I did want to kind of entertain what other options are there for not Mondays, if possible. Except when holidays.
Holiday yesterday.
So I can put out a survey for we already have next year's, but the following years, we can survey folks, and let's see what we do for the following year, not next year, but the following year.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay.
That usually comes in the organization meeting in December. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you for bringing that up now. And there may be need for more follow-up, a next step on backup information on agenda items. I'm kind of hearing, I feel like we're kind of rushing through that one. In terms of conducting meetings, whenever they might be, Monday or another day of the week, protocols for seeking information, these items may be clearer at this point in time. Exercising the duty to vote on an action item, that one was the one that kind of stood out in this area. Has that been resolved in terms of discussion for exercising the duty to vote on an action item? Okay, so everyone tends to engage and be part of that.
Everybody votes, and I think maybe, I don't know, because I had mentioned it before, that I believe that it's also the duty of the board members to tell why they vote the way they do, if they voted, especially a no vote, because sometimes there's something that I didn't even think of, and it makes me change my mind. And I've had board members do that in the past, where they said something, and I said, oh my gosh, I never considered that. So then I changed my vote. I was like, oh, wait, I'm going to vote no on this also.
Sorry, and I've been speaking a lot, but so with that, I do have I don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, and just in terms of thinking, in terms of everyone's manner in which they vote, or a manner in which they carry themselves, if we're asking the no's, should we not ask the yeses? And that opens a can of worms in terms of, like, we're going to spend hey, I said I vote all the ayes, yes, because of X, Y, and Z. Yes, because of X, Y, and Z. And so I don't know if necessarily that's in terms of freedom of speech and freedom of exercising their vote, like, should there be that?
So it currently is in the board protocols. So if that's something that we want to change, when we loop back around with the board protocols, we can engage in that conversation as far as explaining your no vote. So
Right,
we
because I see it as like you have conversations up there and you talk and you expose yourself, right? If you want to be a board member that votes no all day long and not say anything, that you have that right to. I mean, that might not look like the best thing for you, right, as an individual, but you have the repercussions of that for you and your constituents with your constituents or whatever. That will follow, right?
You should have the same right then. I mean, have to do the same.
Right, exactly. So yeah. So it's like I it's good governance that we do have those discussions and say, hey, I don't agree with this, but to say, hey, I'm gonna necessarily, like, and I don't know if this happens after, before, or when of stating that yes, of that no vote is. I don't know if that necessarily is something that we have to dictate, right? Is that the individual board members' right or to do or not do?
So we've had happen in the past where board members did not say why they're voting no, or that they were going to vote no,
and the vote went 4-3 and no vote. It was a total shock to the superintendent, and that superintendent was livid because that was a surprise. Like, they couldn't respond to anything because they didn't know the board was going to vote that way. So to me, it's allowing the board, the superintendent to understand these board members are feeling this way, so they have an opportunity to respond to that negative, maybe change what was planned so that it could pass in the way that they needed. And so I think, and I was one of the no votes at a meeting too for that. And so I actually changed my no vote to a yes vote so we could talk about it, because I wanted us to talk about it more. So I changed it so we could accomplish what needed to be done that night. And so I think, I'm just saying, out of respect to the superintendent and the district, it's wise for us to be able to say why we're voting no, so that the superintendent isn't caught off guard and like, oh my gosh, how did this happen? Now what am I gonna do? Everything I was planning isn't gonna happen because of this. So I don't want that to happen. And so that's why it's just being respectful to me, to the other board members, and saying, here's why I'm voting no, and letting the superintendent know that, so that there isn't a surprise of 4-3 vote.
And if you follow parliamentary procedures or Robert's Rules of Orders, you may want to check that too, because I think they specify for no votes and abstentions. There has to be a specific reason for an abstention. So you may want, if you follow those rules, you may want to, as a next step, at least do a review of those to see how that got into your protocols.
We can bring that back up.
Can lead to a tie.
So I know this is a great conversation, but we have a full 30 minutes and
Yes.
with 25 minutes to do this in. So I do want to thank Sally for facilitating the conversation. Thank you all for participating in doing the survey and getting you guys that information, and then putting it together and having this great conversation. So I appreciate it. Now with that, Trustee Brown, I think we have to open and then ask. Yes, yeah.
Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you. We went straight to the board meeting.
We need to open the door and get warm. All right, welcome again to Modesto City Schools 1494th regular board meeting of June 20th, 2023. We'll now prepare to go into closed session. Public comment, I see no one from the public. Sally, did you have any comments on our closed session? All right, so we have no public comments. We will close the open session and go into closed session.